Welcome and greetings to this first video about Lightroom workflow, which is on part of my blog at All Is Light Photo and Video. And this first video is just about the library module in Lightroom, how I use it, a general overview of the different features and functions, and then in subsequent videos I will look at the develop and also print module. So let's get straight into it. You can see on the top right hand side here I have library, develop and print. Now this video is about my method and what I do as a commercial photographer based in Brisbane. Others will use it in their own particular ways, but this is what works for me. If you right click on that, you can see there are a number of other options you can have here. There's map, there's book, there's slideshow, there's all these other things, none of which I use. I do all of my work both professionally and privately in these three modules: the library, develop and the print modules. And just to clarify as well, I use Lightroom as an image processing engine, specifically to process raw images, to take them from the camera to get them ready for print. I do not use Lightroom for cataloging of images. I use something else for that. So this is strictly about using Lightroom as an image processing engine. So firstly, the library module. So this is the module where I spend most of my time, and I do a number of things in here. You can see back in the blog I've listed these things, but essentially it's where I import photos. So there's an import button down the bottom here. It's where I view photos. So obviously you can view them here, you can double click and you can see them in full. It's where I sort photos. So I rate and sort them as well. So I go through, you can see there's a star rating here. 1 star, 1 star, no star. This is where I actually do the sorting and going through images from a shoot. It's also where I select images using different color codes. So if a client says, yes, this is a particular image I want, it'll get a blue color code. If I select something and deem it, nah, don't really want it anymore, I'm not going to keep it, but I might keep the raw, I'll use a yellow code. So I have a system of coding for the selection. It's also for keywording. So I add the keywords in the library module, and that's done over on this right hand side. You can see keywording. And finally we do exporting. And this is where once all the editing is completed, we can then export the image. So let's just go through the layout of this module and a couple of things that you can do. It's broken into 4 discrete sections. The first one is the left-hand panel over here, which I'm circling. Then there's a middle section with the previews. There's a right-hand section with some controls, and there's a film strip down the bottom. Now, on each of these corners you can see the little triangle. If you push the triangle, the menu disappears or it reappears. Disappears, reappears. And you can also right-click on that and have it as an auto-hide or a hide and show, so you can choose how you want it to show. I just click on it or make it disappear or make it appear. Now, the quickest way to do this, though, is with the tab button. And just a note here also, I'm on a PC, so there may be some variants for those of you on Mac. But the tab button instantly takes away the 2-side menus, which is very handy. If I'm looking at a couple of images side by side, for example, I want to see them in a bigger view than this, I'll just tab and I'll get rid of those menus when I don't need them. If you do Shift Tab, it clears everything, so it clears the film strip as well down the bottom. So you can just see if I hover over the little arrow, auto hide and show, that comes back. Or a Shift Tab and it comes back as well. You can also adjust the size of these things, so these are all flexible. So you can basically set it up in a way that works best for your workflow. Now, the left-hand side here, essentially what that is showing you your computer. This is showing you the location of images on your computer and where you're working. There's a button here called Navigator. Now these little triangles open and close. The Navigator I never use. I'm just not quite sure why that's there. You can use it to tell how far your zoom will go, but once that's set, I just don't like to be looking at that, so I close that down. Catalog I rarely use. This is just telling us what's in the catalog and previous imports and so forth. But the main event here is the folders. So these are the different disks on my computer. As you can see, I've got a local disk, C and E, got an on-site backup, and then I've got a server which has got all my RAWs and also my derivative files. Collections, where you can create virtual folders of images. I don't use that a lot. We won't go into that today, but can be handy for a lot of people. And publish services, I don't even know what that is, hardly ever used it. So the most important thing for me is where these images are. So whenever I load or import a series of images, they import to my E drive into what's called the working files. So I use this method where everything that's new and imported goes into working files, and that's where they stay until I'm finished with them. So I'll always know that all the work in progress files that I have are in one place at one time. And I've got a bunch of personal and project type of stuff in here. I've shot some stuff called Lightroom test shots just around the house just to do this video. And so that you can just see there's 25 shots. Let me have a look here. That's all of them there in the thumbnail view. Equally, I could click on something else like lens tests, where I've done some testing of lenses, everything else that I've got in this area. But for now, let's just work on this. Once I'm finished with a client's work and it's all edited, I'll export the files, which is here. Make sure everything's good with the export, and then I'll basically get rid of these working files out of the working folder. So that left-hand side is essentially where images are on your computer. Now the middle part here, this is the all-important viewing of your folder or viewing of your files. And there's a number of ways you can do that, and there's these buttons down the bottom. We're currently in the grid view. Then there's an individual mode, which is the loop view. There's a compare mode as well, and then there's this survey view. Now, I'm a big fan of keyboard shortcuts. You'll see here for this one here, if you hover over it, it says grid view is G. So G and loop view here is E. So if we simply push E, it's going to take us straight there. If we hit G, it's going to take us straight there. And if we hit N for the survey mode, it'll do a comparison of however many we choose to select. And this is an excellent way to compare images. The compare mode view, I really don't use that very often. I tend to use the grid, the loop, and then this survey mode the most. The plus and the minus keys will also make things bigger and smaller in that particular view. If you double click on one, is another way to get into an individual image. You'll see that the cursor is a magnifying glass. You simply click on that, and that'll zoom in. Now, I've got it up on the top left-hand side here at 1:1. If we do 2:1, it goes even closer. And I find that too close, so I find 1:1 is really great to be able to check sharpness on images. So if we click here, zoom in, we can check the sharpness on that. If we go to 2:1, just a bit more difficult. And the fit and the fill, obviously I want to see the whole photo or I want to zoom in. So we have it set on fit and then go to 1:1. Now a couple other things that are important to note about this here. Firstly, in the grid mode, you can see, let's just zoom in a little bit. The way I've set this up is I have the file name listed underneath the thumbnail. I have the star rating on the top left-hand side, and I have the color rating on the top right. For me, I like to have the file name underneath the image. It seems to make a lot more sense. Don't like it above, I don't know why, it's just that's for me. Now we can change that by going down to view options. And you can see here grid view, which is what we're in. I want to show the compact grid actions in the compact cells. And the main thing, there's a whole lot of stuff you can put in here and change, but the main thing I want to do is here, compact cell extras. You can just see the top label, I want the rating, which is the star, and I want the color label, and on the bottom I want the file name. And that's it. Very simple. You can play around with all the rest of how this shows up and so forth. You can see numbers behind each of these images. But for the sake of setting this up, that's what I use. Now in the loop view, this actually gives us some information about our images, which is very handy when looking at them. So you can have two set up here, and they're accessed by the I for information button. The first one you can see here, I've set them up here, but let's just cancel that. If you hit I for information once, there's nothing. If you hit the second one, I've set this up with the file name, plus the main thing for me is the size of the image, the dimensions, which is often handy. But this is the main event where I want to have the shutter speed, the aperture, the ISO, and also the lens that was used. I find that information is the most accessible that I need, but as I said, you can easily find that at any other point. View options, come back here, and here you could change what actually shows in those areas. That type of setup, getting your space working for you is very important, and it works very well. Now, just to finish, I'm not going to go into depth on this, but you can see the star rating. The reason I use star rating is if this was for a client and say I'm going through these images, what I'll do is I will use my very first rating of an image is going to be to decide whether to keep it or to just simply lose it and never see it again. It's a quick way to go through a bunch of images quickly to say keep or no keep. So, and I use 1 star for keeping, and I simply don't star something that I want. So I might say, for example, select all 3 of those, use N to go to the compare mode, use Tab so I can see them, and now I'm only working on these 3 images. Now, I just shot these quickly, so they're all actually not very good, but for the sake of purpose here, let's just say, let's just get rid of the rating. So none of these are rated. I can come in and have a look at the first one. I can zoom in. No, it's a little bit soft. That's no good. I can zoom in on the second one. That's also soft. And then this one's really out of focus. So that's definitely I don't want to keep that. Let's just say I want to keep one of the first ones. I'll hit 1 star and I'm going to keep that. Move on to my calculator images. Same thing. In this case, I can zoom in, have a look. Yep, like that one, 1 star. And you can just see I've gone through and I've 1 starred a bunch of these images. And some have stars, some have don't. Now, one of the real strengths of Lightroom is the filter mode. Now, the filter is found down here on the bottom right. So what I can now tell Photoshop, what I can tell Lightroom to do is to only show me the images that I've starred. They're the only ones I want to work with, and I want to see the others. So I can say filter here, you can flag things, but I'm going to show me 1 star images only. And it shows me only those other ones. And I can flick this on and off here. So the images are still there, but I'm only looking at the ones I've starred. This makes it extremely handy for sorting through large lots of images. Now if I say, for example, keyworded this one with 2, this little sign here is saying show me greater than or equal to. So I might have said that 2 star image is a really good one. If I change that to show me equal to, it's only showing me 1 star images. Most often I find I want to see 1 star or better. But you can play again with what you want to do there. And of course, a huge bonus for Lightroom is that you can save presets, and you can do that in a wide range of areas, and particularly filters. So I've got a whole bunch of filters here preset, so 1 star and blue. So I use blue, so let's just say in this case, I've sent these images as proofs to my client. They get to see them. They come back to me and say, Dean, we like this one, this one, this one, this one. They give me a list of images that they want. I'll give them a blue rating, which for me means the client selected them. So they're 1 star, which means I selected them originally. They're now 1 star in blue because the client has said they want them. Now if I go down and say I want to see 1 star in blue, I'm now seeing just those images. So one further part of filtering is up here in text, attribute, metadata, and none. If I click metadata, now I can start to filter down even further. And here, if I want to see all the labels, so either color labels or none, but if I now only want to see what the client has selected, I can further drill it down. So now I'm seeing the ones I've given them, but they're given to me. And in this particular instance, these are the ones that I then do the developing on, and I make them right for the client. It's very powerful in its filtering and also in the way you can set up templates. So this video is getting quite long, but let's just finish up and talk about the right-hand side. This right-hand side here is comprised of a few important features. One is a histogram. Very, very handy to show you the light distribution in your image. Basically, everything to the right is completely white and everything to the left is completely black. I'll just quickly go into the develop module and show you that. So if I was to push the exposure up, you can see what's happening to my histogram. It's pushing all the way to the right and it's seriously overexposed. And this little triangle is a warning. If I hover over that, you can see it'll show me all the overexposed areas. Similarly, if I move my exposure slider all the way to the left, it's completely underexposed in all those areas. And if I double click on this little button, it takes me right back to the middle. So the histogram is shown in your library module here. The quick develop triangle gives you an opportunity to quickly make changes. So in this particular case, exposure, clarity, environment, you can't actually change all that much. I tend to not use this. I prefer to do more edits in the develop mode. Keywording is extremely handy. I do all my keywording here in Lightroom, and this is a big area. I could do a whole video on this, but essentially this is where I'd add keywords. So I might add, I don't know, light. Let's see if there's a light there. I'll add the light, and it adds it to the keyword. There's also a keyword list, which is all my keywords, which I've got like lots of them. I can also go down and I can simply click on a keyword and it'll be added there too. So without going into any further depth on that, this is where I do the keyword. There's also metadata, so we can add and look at the metadata here. We can add copyright information. A lot of the metadata I include in the photos on import, so when they import through, they'll then get added, the metadata will be added to the photo. I rarely use this section. It's normally done on import and then left alone. So generally, the way I operate this right-hand side is I like to see my histogram, and also it's where I do my keywording. So I'll sometimes have that list open, or I'll just keyword from this section here. And finally, down the bottom, we've got a film strip. This is great because it just shows you all the images that we're working on. If we go back to our section here, I've done the 1 star in blue. Let's turn off the filter so we see all of our images. So they're in the film strip. I can just scroll along there. It can be quite handy if I'm just viewing an image in the full screen, but I still want to see where I'm going with the images down the bottom. And then say I want to compare these 3 down the bottom here. I'll click on all 3. I'll hit my N button. I'll hit my tab button, and then I'm comparing images. If I want to add another one in there, I'll just control and I'll add that in too. So I think that might be it for now. A few other just basic things just before we finish. We can talk about the capture time. So generally I want to see the photos in the order of the time that I've photographed them. You can do this as added order, how you added in the file to Lightroom. You can do it by all sorts of stuff, by the file name, for example. If my camera clicks over, say from 9,999 to 1 again during a shoot, if I list these by file name, it'll sort of be out of order. So I tend to do my my sorting in this mode via the capture time. So it's in a chronological, logical sort of order. And this little film strip that we've got along here, if you hit the T button, that'll appear. If you hit it again, it disappears. So that brings up some very basic stuff like your ratings, whether you want to rotate a photo, so I can choose to rotate them all or rotate them back. Then I can select through the next photo here as well. I guess the main takeaway for a lot of this is for efficient workflow, always look to see how you can increase your speed and efficiency through the use of shortcuts. There's another blog on my site about some technical workflow and how I use a gamepad for my left hand when I workflow, and I have a lot of Lightroom assigned shortcuts into that gamepad, which just makes again editing faster and more efficient. And any efficiency savings you can make when you're dealing with thousands and thousands of images per week add up to a very, very big saving at the end of the week. Okay, so that's part one of this video. Part two, coming shortly, will be on the development. Thanks.